Everyone, and we are from the Inter-American Social Security Conference in Mexico City. We're very pleased to welcome you, and we are happy to be in such an important event. I'm Maria Teresa Gonzalez, Technical and Legal Advice of ASIS. We would like to welcome you to the presentation of the book, Pension Non-Contributory systems in Latin America, advancing with solidarity, and in the continental framework of the Conference of Social Security. In this occasion, this event is led by the Central American sub-region in close collaboration with the Division of Social Development of the ECLAC. And we're very happy to address a crucial topic, the importance of non-contributory systems for pensions as a tool to go to the solidarity, universality, and sustention in social security. We want to support you that this event is being transmitted through our platforms of YouTube and Zoom in Spanish and English for you to tune us up. That allows us to extend this discussion to a larger audience. We want to thank each of you for being with us today. First of all, this is a privilege to have the participation of Pedro Kumamoto Aguilar, has a master's and has his first intervention as General Secretary for the subregion. And this is the first event for the year for the conference. So it's a very special opportunity to start this year, 2025, with the commitment of generating a constructive dialogue on Social Security. And please, Mr. Secretary, we know you want to address the floor. Thank you so much, Masters Maria Teresa. Good day, afternoon, depending on where you are, to all people, all the authorities, colleagues, and peers, and virtual attendees. It is such an honor to have you here in this presentation. This is a space for a kind of reflection and exchanges of information for Latin America and the Caribbean, the non-contributory system. I want to thank in particular to the Economic Commission for the Caribbean, the ACLAC, to be part of the discussion and start the agreement amongst our institutions. I'd like to underscore that, as mentioned by Maria Teresa, is my first public activity as an interim secretary of this important organization that is your home. I want to thank the members of the Permanent Commitment for their trust to assume this position. These first weeks, I've been getting to know the work that have been done by the subregions as one of the statutory part of the Inter-American Social Security. And what better than starting with you, the membership, the activities of 2025 in these summits, continental summits of good practices in social securities, and each of the subregions is going to celebrate throughout this year. I'd like to take this moment to congratulate and celebrate our distinguished panelists. First of all, Alberto Arenas de Mesa, the head of social development of the Economic Activity for Latin America and the Caribbean, the ECLAC. Mr. Serondoni is the head of the board and coordinator of the Central American Second Division of Guatemala in Social Security. Claudia Robles, the official of social matters in Social Security of the economic condition for Latin America and the Caribbean. Likewise, Ruben Coquimoyo, the executive director on the supervision of Social Security and the short term of the plurinational state of Bolivia. Also, Mr. Victor Hugo Montoya, the institutional head of the Office of Normalization, the OMP of the Peruvian Republic. Welcome also Vanessa Weinstein, General Director of International Affairs of the Social Policies Council of the Minister of Social Development of the Argentinian nation. Welcome also Pedro Alcántara from the policies of survival, old age, of the Vice Presidency of Actuary and Financing in the National Board of Social Security of the Dominican Republic. Welcome Victor Martinez, Manager of Invalidity, Old Age and Death in Honduras, the IHSS of the Honduras Republic. Florian Jurgens Grant from the Global Social Protection Advisor in Women in Informal Employment, Globalizing and Organizing from the UK. Welcome. And I would like to tell you that this is a publication that is so relevant because it's the effort, the collective effort that allows us today to gather together and analyze and share key experiences in the implementation of non-contributive pension systems that are core to ensure the social protection for the most vulnerable sectors in our populations. And as the economies in the region continue evolving, it is important that pension systems are inclusive, are fair, and sustainable. And the systems that are not contributory are a vital tool in order to help the citizens that don't have access to pensions through other mechanisms. And in spite of the progress, countries in our region are facing a shared challenge, expanding the coverage of these systems without putting at risk, on the other hand, the sustainability, the financial sustainability. Solidarity is the basis of non-contributive systems. However, it should be very carefully balanced with the economic sustainability and the challenges in ensuring that these systems will prevail in time and will continue benefiting future generations. Throughout this event, we will hear firsthand the experiences of countries like Bolivia, Peru, Argentina, Dominican Republic, and Honduras that have implemented non-contributive systems with different focuses, results, and challenges. These experiences give us very important lessons on how to structure public policies to strengthen such systems. For example, Bolivia has given very important steps towards the inclusion of the most vulnerable sectors, whereas Peru and Argentina have assigned priority to the universal coverage of pensions. In Honduras and the Dominican Republic, they've designed innovative mechanisms to improve sustainability and efficiency that for their non-contributory systems. Solidarity should be a core principle. Nevertheless, it's also crucial to have a robust financial framework. The non-contributory systems should have financing that will allow them to prevail in the long run without depending on the budget of the states or the countries. Financial sustainability is not a barrier. Nevertheless, it's a principle that allows us to continue progressing in the well-being of vulnerable populations without putting at risk public resources and economic stability. And to progress, it's also very important to continue learning from the shared experiences in these type of summits and publications, and for us to continue strengthening the regional cooperation. Only through the dialogue and the exchange of good practices will be able to find some innovative solutions that will allow us to expand the coverage without committing the financial stability of our countries. And I'd like to congratulate you, and I'd like to invite and take advantage of this exchange and reflection day to advance and progress in a sustainable, solidary, and fair future. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Attendees, assistants, participants, authors, and of course, for your commitment with social inclusion and sustainability in our region. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary, for your opening address and welcoming us. And next, in this small opening, it's an honor to introduce Dr. Alberto Arenas de Mesa, the head of social development of the ECLAC. He has led this initiative. He is the main author of the book that is presented today. And Dr. Arenas, we are very pleased to have you with us today. Thank you. Thank you so much. And good day and good afternoon, where I am in other parts of the region, and for all of us that are here in this event. It's such a great pleasure to participate of the opening of this event organized by the Inter-American Social Security, CIS, the Economic and the Caribbean, ECLAC, and will generate a regional dialogue according to the book CEPAL, Pension Non-Contributed Systems in the Caribbean and Latin America, and with sustainability that we have co-edited together with Claudia Robles, the head of Social Security in ECLAL. Also, Pedro Kumamoto, the General Secretary of the Inter-American Social Security. Thank you so much for joining us. And I also want to cordially welcome Mario Esteron, the representative of the Directive of the Guatemalteca Social Security, Eric Victor Hugo Montoya from Peru, Pedro Alcántara from Dominican Republic. I would like to greet all the government authorities and from Bolivia, from Honduras, Peru, Dominican Republic, that are going to be with us in this event and greet each and everyone that follow us virtually. This event looks to introduce the main challenges of the book that has just been mentioned that was elaborated under the framework with cooperation of Germany entitled Surpassing the Consequences of COVID in Latin America and the Caribbean. And then I'd like to reiterate our support for the German cooperation that has been key for the work that we have done from the ECLAC. In this event, it's very important to talk about the centrality of non-contributive systems that are comprehensive in a region that it has a crisis of development and it has important transformations. As mentioned, 8 systems or strategic policies for a sustainable development in the region, and they face development and the low capability to grow, the high inequalities and low capabilities from the institution to have wealth. So the evolution of the pension systems that are not contributive in the 21st system, in the 21st century, have been part of the social security in Latin America and the Caribbean, experiencing an increase in lack of coverage and expanding the support for older people in their access of pensions. And in particular, I'd like to underscore the contribution of the non-contributive pension systems and there is such inequality, in particular regarding the inclusion of older women in pension systems, whereas in 2010, a third of women that were 65 and older didn't have access to pension systems. So in 2025, this proportion dropped 23%. So in the role, this is very important in the context because of the high levels of informality have a repercussion on important challenges and it is feasible and it's necessary to strengthen both types of pensions and social security in order to progress in an eradication of poverty in our countries and also the supporting old people of senior citizens with a policy. So we hope to have the discussions in these events by talking about strategies in order to strengthen social security systems as a whole in an historical global moment, and in particular in a year where the second World Summit on Social Security Development, they are going to take place, among other factors, to progress inclusive social security in the system. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Arenas, for his opening address for us in the conference. It's an honor to present this work, this book. So we're very happy to introduce you. Then we'd like to give the floor to Mario Serondonis, Regional Coordinator in Central America and representatives of the Guatemaltecan Social Security Institute, whose vision and presence has always been important for the role played by the subregions in the conference and in all its spaces. Dr. Seron, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much and good morning to everyone. And it's such an honor to receive you in this important event organized by the Central American Subregion jointly with the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, where we are going to we're going to present the book, Non-contributive Pension Systems for Latin America and the Caribbean, Progressing in Solidarity with Sustainability. This is an initiative of the ECLAC that invited the conference to find an ally to try to talk about the diversification of pension systems. And first of all, I would like to take advantage of this space to greet you and welcome warmly to the General Secretary of the conference, Pedro Kumamoto. Also, I would like to acknowledge Dr. Alberto Arenas de Mesa, the head of the social development of ECLAC, as well as all the panelists and all the personalities and government officials that are with us this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Social security in our region is an essential pillar to ensure social justice and equality. Nevertheless, we know that even there's a lot to do so that this basic right reaches all people. On behalf of the Guatemaltecan Social Security Institute, we have assigned a priority as a key factor to consider the non-contributive regimes, not as a necessary contribution, but as a transformative tool in order to progress towards the universality of social security protection and to have a solidary society. The idea of ensuring social universal security has been a yearn that has been shared by our institution, has been a yearning that no one, or let's say, in other words, not nobody should stay behind. We all yearn to everybody have there, and it's part of the Popol Vuh code, in particular, senior citizens that have contributed to their efforts for the development of our societies and deserve a dignified aging. So I would like to acknowledge the ECLAC because they've played such an important role by gathering efforts and generating technical knowledge and visibility in the non-contributive systems as a viable and solidary alternative in order to strengthen social protection. Its contribution has been core to foster political and technical dialogue in order to improve public policy so they are inclusive and sustainable in all of Latin America and the Caribbean. I am fully convinced that this event is going to be an enriching mirror in order to share experiences of our own invited guests countries, and that would lead us to the reflection of the challenges that we're facing and more than anything else to analyze together solutions that will allow us to continue progressing towards pension systems that are fair and equitable. Thank you to each of you, all the commentators that are going to be with us, and all the people, all the attendees, because with your participation and with your commitment, you are going to enrich this event. With nothing further, I would like to give the floor back to our dear Maria Teresa, that is going to give the honor of moderating the next interventions. Thank you so much, and welcome again, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Sedon. Thank you to the Guatemaltecan Institutes for Social Security that always supports us in these events. And aside from coordinating, the sub-region leads this type of initiatives that gather us today. Thank you so much. And more than anything else, I'd like to thank in particular my peers from the attention to the members and liaisons that allowed us to have this space. Brandon Teres Gonzalez, the Under Director of Strategic Alliances, Oscar Turian from the liaisons and attention to the members. And thank you so much to Shaya and Palomo, that is the liaison of this region. And also welcome Daniela Chose Estrada, that is incorporating herself to the conference team for the attention of the membership, and she's also with us here. And thank you, everybody. And also thanks to our communications area that makes possible for us to see each other, as well as our technical group that is here present in the room. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to everyone for your distinguished words and the commentators that will talk, and we are going to be delighted in their chats. This is a commitment of the construction of social security systems that are sustainable and inclusive, as mentioned before. before. And what a better way of going deeper in these efforts because of the collaboration of the CLAC that we're so happy to work with. Is an institution that has had a very important role in making more visible these solidarity systems. And now, in order to go to the next part, I'm going to start this technical discussion. Again, I'd like to welcome Dr. Alberto Arenas de Mesa, the head of social development, but also to Gloria Robles, the officer of matters on social security of the ECLAC, that are the authors and editors of this book that we're introducing today. Thank you for being with us, and we'd like to give you the floor. Please go ahead. Thank you. Thank you so much, Maria Teresa. Good afternoon from Chile. Good day to everyone. Secretary General Kumamoto, again, such a pleasure to greet you, Dr. Mario Cerón. And I would like to thank again the participation of all commentators that we'll have next. Mr. Ruben from Bolivia, Mr. Victor Hugo Montoyo from the ONTT from Peru, Ms. Vanessa Weinstein from Argentina, and so we are going to have Victor Martinez from Honduras, and so Ms. Jurgen, and also I'd like to take this space to thank you in particular about Brandon Perez and Chara Salomo, and that we have had to progress in this event. So now I'd like to ask, we want to do this presentation in the joint manner with our head of the Division of Social Security, and I'm going to put it in presentation. We're going to make this presentation with our head of the Division of Social Security. And for me, it has been such an honor to edit and co-edit and write this book with Alberto Arenas de Mesa. He has a great path in topics related to pensions in our region, as well as I want to thank him so much for this important space to present. And our book is called Pension Systems That Are Not Contributive in the Latin America and the Caribbean, Expanding in Solidarity with Sustainability. And here I'd like to start by giving you some of the key messages that we have in these presentations. And to start, and we have a core dimension of the systems. And so from CEPAL, we have insisted, and they're universal because they are comprehensive, sustainable, and resilient. The pension system that are not contributive, they have a very important role to reach this goal of old age. And also because of the deficits that we're going to talk about the operation and sustainability and in our region. So the expansion of pension systems is a main transformation of social protection in this century in the region. So we're going to see some important challenges. And as a matter of fact, we've done the analysis with other programs that are very relevant in our systems. And the truth is that they are outstanding because of the different policies that we've been able to review. The pension system, non-contributive pension system, are a public policy that has been approved through the basis of legal advance, through the institutional capability that is developed in the countries, through its financial sustainability, and through its social events in the reduction of poverty and inequality, and in particular gender inequality, as mentioned by Alberto slowly. It's important and viable to eradicate the poverty in old age. We are at the center of this strategy, and we also state in this book that this strategy can be strengthened.
Just to give you an idea of the book, I will share with you the link later on the Zoom chat, but this is for you to know that we are the co-editors. Well, we are the editors, but there are many authors that have put their chapters in the book. Alberto participated in 5 chapters, the introductory chapter and the first chapter, the third chapter that provide context on the non-contributive systems of the region, and also chapter 9, which talks about financial sustainability of these non-contributory pension systems, along with Juan Villa and Ernesto Espíndola, who provides chapter 9 on the recommendations for strengthening these schemes. Camila Arza is the co-author of at least 2 chapters in this book that provide information of these pension systems in Europe and in other regions of the world. And she talks about their contribution to reducing the gender inequalities. Juan Vila, as I mentioned earlier, has made a key analysis to provide a context of non-contributory systems, and he has also participated in chapters 4, along with Pablo Yáñez. They talked about the analysis of the path towards universalization of these pension systems. This is something that we see in at least 3 countries, Bolivia, Mexico, and Chile. And obviously, there is the chapter on Dominican Republic. Nielsen Figueroa wrote it, as well as the financial sustainability chapter, which is chapter 9. Martin Cherkassky Rapa also wrote chapter 5 on Argentina. Noelia Bernal talked about Peru in chapter 6. And finally, Manuel Delgado wrote chapters 7 and 8 that address topics on the Dominican Republic and in Honduras. He's also co-author of the book, and as I told you earlier, Ernesto Espíndola on chapter 9. So the non-contributory pension systems have a key role in providing economic security in old age. And something that's very relevant to us is, for example, analyzing the characteristics of the non-contributory pension systems, because the characteristics are not very clear cut in the conferences or in the documents, but a system like this is different from a monetary transfer system. It is a monetary benefit that is provided regularly and in a stable way. It aims to eradicate poverty in old age and increase coverage and sufficiency of pension systems as a whole. Those are contributions that are not, or benefits that are not necessarily related to the pension system during the active stage of people's lives. These are, in some countries, a separate component. And there are different financing and funding modalities. So, for example, they can be public or privately funded, and they have the role of regulating gender inequality. They also have a key role in territorial and socioeconomic characteristics or inequalities. And the documents that we have so far analyze the 5 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean that don't have these kinds of systems: Honduras, Nicaragua, Santa Lucia, and many more. So these types of systems have grown in popularity because they reduce poverty in old age, and they address different problems related to the efficiency of the pension systems. So here we can see the deficits and the inequalities in labor inclusion in the region. And for example, in 2022, this study was conducted, but half of the active population, 62.1% of this population, had been excluded from the active coverage of pensions. That means that they were not making any contributions to the pension systems in 2022. So we're talking about 181 million workers being excluded. And we also have the liability contributory coverage that has grown at least 3 percentage points between 2000 and 2022. So from 49% to 52.3% of the population age 65 years and over. So this talks about the need to keep expanding these pension systems. But a key message that we provide is that we need to strengthen the coverage of non-contributory pension systems. And this is a persistent challenge still in the region. So the expansion of the non-contributory pension systems is the main transformation of social protection in this century. Here we can see a great expansion in the coverage of the non-contributory pension systems in Latin America and the Caribbean between 2000 and 2022, in contrast to what I was telling you before regarding the non-contributive pension systems. So as you can see, the coverage here increases above 27.6 percentage point between 2000 and 2022. So this has contributed to reducing the coverage gaps of the pension systems in our region. This is translated to 1 million people covered aged 65 years and above. So from 1 million in 2000, we went to 19.6 million in 2022. So we have 14 countries in 2000 and 20 something in 2022. Now, regarding the pensioners or the retirees, the total number of the pensioners in this same period of time, as you can see in this graph, in 2000, 6.6% of the total pensioners aged 65 years and over, they were receiving non-contributory pensions. But in 2022, this percentage accounts for 41.8%. Same thing happens with women receiving non-contributory pensions. So what are the factors that explain the expansion in the coverage of these systems? Well, the strengthening of social protection systems. In the last 2 decades, we have seen great expansion of these social protection schemes. And we have also seen that the concept has been assimilated, and these schemes are gaining popularity and relevance. And in addition, there is an agenda revolving around the eradication of extreme poverty and the eradication of high inequalities, including gender inequality. The agenda also focuses on the deficits of contributive or contributory systems, a high level of an informal market, and an accelerated aging. So I will provide more data before giving the floor to Alberto. The high coverage of the contributory systems can be seen in the high inequalities between the sectors of the greatest income and the lowest income. So we can see the coverage of contributory liabilities when people 65 years and over. So you can see that in 2000 it was 5.1%, and in 2022, 74.2%. Latin America is going to age at the same levels as Europe, but in half of the time. So here we can see that people aged 65 and over, from 10 to 20% of the overall population, we have people aged 65 years and over. And the gray line represents the trend that Europe follows. So we can see the path towards 20.4%. So it took 57 years for them to reach this percentage, but in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have estimated that this is going to take 30 years, which is half of the period of time that Europe had. So now I will give the floor to the head of the Social Development Division, Alberto Arenas. Thank you so much, Claudia. So can you please keep moving the slides?
Estupendo. Bueno, mira, perfecto. Entonces, estamos en el panorama de los
All right, so we were discussing the context of the non-contributory pension systems in the region, and we also talked about its main characteristics. And in general, Claudia was talking about the expansion of the coverage, and she said that it has been really significant. It has reached 31% in the populations of 65 years and over, and this was from 2000 to 2022. Therefore, as you can see here, there are 2 axes in this graph. So you can see great diversity in the coverage here. So we were mentioning 31% of coverage of non-contributory pension schemes. This is an average, but there is great diversity in this percentage. There are countries that have a coverage of 1 digit, and there are some countries that reach 30%, and there are other countries that have a very high coverage. We can mention as examples Paraguay, 2 out of 3 people of 65 years and over are covered, and Chile, Bolivia, and Mexico have shown similar data. So within this context, the book addresses different cases of study cases in the region with different countries with different coverage levels and different development. So we have, for example, a universal approach coverage. As I told you, Bolivia, Chile, and Mexico present this kind of coverage. We have the low and mid coverage with countries like Argentina and Peru, and yeah, that is the case in Argentina. It has a really high contributory pension system rate, which means that the non-contributory pension rate is rather low. And we have the low coverage of, and in this case, we have the examples of the Dominican Republic and Honduras. In Honduras, there is still debate around the creation of systems like this. So we can see that the non-contributory pension systems have increased in number and have increased their coverage with the public expenditure in the region. So from 3.4%, we moved to 31%. And you can see in the graph that the expenditure has decreased. So it moved from 0.15 of the GDP to 0.42 in 2021. So the expenditure has been rather moderate. So we see only an increase of a few points, and this has allowed this growth that we see, the covering of 20 million people 65 years old and over. So what are the impacts of this? We studied this in a chapter of the book, and we analyzed how they decrease poverty and inequality in old age. As you can see here, this is a graph that we created, and we analyzed 9 countries in the region that made reforms, creating these new schemes. And on average, they had a poverty index of 34% in the population of 65 years and over, and then after implementing the system, the poverty rate decreased 10% by 10%. So yeah, there is a correlation between this. So the systems were created and the poverty in old age decreased significantly. So to the right in the graph, we can see a little curve that shows how the distribution of the income improves in the population of 65 years and over when they get a hold of non-contributory pension systems. You can see how the curve behaves and it gets closer to the equality line. So the non-contributory pension systems clearly show us the coverage that moves from 3.8% to 31%. But what happened with poverty in the population that we targeted? It moved from 29 to 15.1%. This is not the only factor that is used to analyze the decrease in the poverty rate in old age, but we can see a negative correlation here because there was an increase in the programs and then the poverty was reduced in the region. Now, in the next slide, we can see the impacts beyond the income dimension and beyond the pension system. So evidence shows that the non-contributory pension systems can have an influence on different welfare spheres, for example, social protection in the region, and they are linked to improving food security, and they improve health indicators, they increase the expenditure in education at households, they reduce child labor because more income is being created and made in the households. And it also reduced inequalities in old age, especially inequalities regarding gender. So what is the future of the non-contributory pension systems in the region? So there are some factors that explain the creation or the reforms that trend towards strengthening the non-contributory pension systems in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we haven't identified that legal reforms, when we compare them to structural reforms in the pension system, it can be, for example, a mixed model or a capitalization model. So there is great complexity in these reforms. But there is less complexity when we try to put them into practice. And in relation to this, the political economy is key because behind these non-contributory pension systems that are targeted at reducing poverty in old age, there are cross-cutting agreements that go beyond, let's say, our countries and the trends in our countries, or the trends of the governments in our countries. And there are cross-cutting agreements that make the reforms move forward, because sometimes there are certain weaknesses or challenges when trying to implement them. In the case of non-contributory pension systems, we're talking about cross-cutting agreements, which is not necessarily the case in contributory pension systems. So those are the steps that the region is taking in order to move forward these kinds of pension systems for people aged 65 years and over. So we have nearly 34% of people in the region being covered by this. And financial stability is key. As I told you, on average, we're talking about 0.3%. So we're talking about 0 point something of the GDP to move and progress in these reforms. And therefore, sustainability is not necessarily linked to a structural reform in the contributory pension system. It is rather linked to the fiscal reforms and to fiscal matters and finances. But in this case, we see that there is a budget management that is feasible and that provides feasibility, financial feasibility to the countries. And the non-contributory pension systems in the region have allowed us to reduce poverty in old age effectively. And we have implemented them and we have increased their coverage in the region. So this, as a whole, gives us the possibility of these systems to have sustainability because they have the right coverage, the right benefits, the right amount of financial sustainability, along with other characteristics. This is a way in which they can continue creating reforms and strengthening these systems so that we can eradicate poverty. So it is in this context that we can find, as we said in the book, a pathway that combines coverage levels and the sufficiency of the benefits. So the level of the benefits is key in order to move forward in eradicating poverty. So we want coverage to have specific and adequate systems. So for example, as you can see here, point A can move down, and we can also see how extreme poverty fluctuates. So if there is an increase in coverage, we cover people with lower income, and there is going to be insufficiency in the benefits, and that is similar to the poverty line. So in general, we cannot find a correlation between coverage and the sufficiency of the benefits in order for us to move forward and eradicate poverty. And we can progress with sustainability, with financial sustainability. And this financial sustainability, by the way, we conducted simulations and forecasts of public expenditure in the non-contributory pension systems, specifically for the population aged 65 years and over for the years 2035 and 2055. So in the third column, you can see some highlighted numbers. So if the benefits were equal to the poverty line, what would be the coverage by 2035? So it would be 40%. And if we compare this 40% that we will see in 2035, the expenditure will be around 1.1%. So reaching 1.1% in public expenditure in comparison to 1.5% will make us allocate different resources. So this means that we are allocating resources in the budget of the countries in the right way. So that's why we're going to have more financial stability to eradicate poverty, and thanks
Mira,
to
perfecto.
non-contributory pension systems.
Algo que ya no me han escuchado yo hablar,
Basically, something that you've heard me
una
say, and Claudia said it also, final reflections. Is it possible to eradicate poverty in old age? Yes, we have an important role in the regional social protection systems. We have goals to have coverage and pensions in order to establish a combination of the coverage and have sufficiency in order to progress in the goal of reducing inequality and eradicating poverty in the region. It's viable in the region because, amongst other things, progressing in these systems and putting the institutional challenges for the political systems. And why are they viable? Because one way or another, in these four dimensions, there is technical viability, there is institutional viability in the region, there is financial viability likewise, and there's transversal agreements that allow us to progress in these non-contributory pension systems. So these NCPS don't have people will have an integration and they'll have a system. It's not to replace the contributory systems. It is just to complement the systems to be integrated and inside a pension system. So the pension system could be a new social agreement in the region that will allow us to progress, as we said before, in solidarity with sustainability. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Arenas, Claudia, for this fantastic presentation. And before we go on to the second stage, that are questions from my personal perspective, and we mentioned it in the room, I consider that this text is going to let us talk about public policies in the construction of fairer relationships. And now, let me tell you that these pension systems, and so this is more like an economic term. So we want to promote this vision. So these are a manifestation of solidarity that's intergenerational. This is a social commitment that acknowledges the right of a dignified old age, as Dr. Arena said, aside from labor path and inequalities that each person has faced along their lives. And under the context that we live in the Latin America, where informality is the reality of millions of peoples, these systems have a concrete answer. And so this talks about questions that are very important, and precisely this is what our next section has in order to ask questions to our commentators and about the experience of each country. And in order to give space to this stage, I'd like to give the floor first to Dr. Ruben Colquemoyo. He is the Executive Director of ASUS that is going to talk to us about the plurinational state, the first regional case of a non-contributory system that tends to the universality. Dr. Cole is an expert in health and social security. In the short times, he's a surgeon, has a specialty in epidemiology, public health, and quality management. At present, he's doing a master's in short-term health in the Ibero-American Social Security system. Dr. Cole, such a pleasure to greet you. And the question for you is, from the ASUS experience, the institution that you had, how have the programs contributed Benusol and Dignidad to the reduction of poverty in Bolivia in the last few years? Doctor, please. Well, first of all, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Here in Bolivia is the afternoon already. I'd like to greet each and every one of you. And it is very important to underscore some of the concepts that have been established on how can we have this process and on the senior citizens, because we can have this poverty. So for us, it's very important to establish, and definitely, as a matter of fact, Bonusol, that is the first policy that is implemented in Bolivia, is in 1997. So it is a process that, politically speaking, has been set by liberalism, but as of 2008, we there is a main feature of a system like this is that is universal for everybody that's over 65 years old. This is very important to establish this element, and obviously to do an analysis, definitely, and the poverty line also. And however, this system has been very good in Social Security for old citizens. We have a spam that is called like an insurance for people in old age. And then on the one hand, we talk about providing economic resources to people in their old age. And we also see the topic of health. At present, with a unique system, the spam as a program that is mainly based and is universal, we are in the stage of applying universal health. So in this outlook, as I said, everything that has to do with the topic of the health of senior citizens allow to senior citizens to have these benefits, and this allows them to improve their economic situation, in particular people that were in a poverty situation. And aside from that, with the health system, we are also in our circle assuring better situations for people in old age. And we have also a policy that is called Carmelo, that is a food supplement that allows us to have other elements and give better nutrition to our senior citizens. So first of all, this is a contribution to reduce the poverty in these populations is very important. So this is where we're working basically, and we're trying to ensure that these benefits and senior citizens have. However, in particular, we are oriented towards the municipalities or extreme poverty areas in the country and everywhere where we have this type of policies. We also have problems of having access, because on everything that is payments, and in particular on the banking system, not all the municipalities people have access at the level of a bank. So here we're working in that to have access so that senior citizens can have access to collecting these benefits, and of course are able to reduce poverty indexes. So in these last few years, it's important to underscore that practically we've twofolded the amount of senior citizens that are beneficiaries of this program. We had 700,000 beneficiaries a few years back, and now we have increased the number of we have like 2.3 million people that have benefited from this system. So it's not only, as I said to you, of the monetary aspects, but also we have to add this system to all the other, not only the money that you give to senior citizens, but we also have to include all the food to improve their nutrition. So we have $800 million budgeted for this benefit, and the financing is usually from our countries. The booth apologizes because his sound is horrible, so we're trying to do our best. So, as we said in Bolivia, we have a great commitment of protection, social protection to senior citizens that are over 65 years old age, and we are having great success. Why are we having great success? Because access for senior citizens is is good, and that allows us to see that we'll start perfecting what I said to you, having access to food banks for senior citizens so they can also benefit. And all the target population can be benefited from this benefit likewise. So we are fully convinced that the a benefit of this nature allows the poverty indexes to drop, but also they allow us to contribute in health related topics because food is an element that are correlated so that senior citizens not only have they can have indirect benefits on health and also in topics of their nutrition. So these are the elements that I wanted to mention. And this is a very important contribution because it allows us to clarify what has been the role of the state to contribute to senior citizens in economic sustainability and contributions to for them to be able to have a better life quality. And we've done several studies to see where the money is spent, and uh, this contributes importantly to the day-to-day work, to the day-to-day life of senior citizens. And we're working with the ECLAC to reduce the social gap that we have. And at present, through the profitability, we're improving this work and the resources that are a basis for our social movement. And this is all I wanted to say. And if you have any additional question, we are here to serve you. Doctor, thank you so much for your contribution, for always supporting us, Dr. Ruben Kolke, for all the work that we do from the conference. And next, I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Victor Hugo Montoya Chavez from Peru. And Dr. Montoya is going to share the vision of the chapter Peru. How can we improve the pension system that is non-contributed system? Dr. Montoya, the head of the Office for Provisional Normalization, as I said, in Peru, is a specialist in pensions, public management, public rights, has experience in the public sector, in constitutional economy and public finances, and provisional. He studied law, a rule of law, and government. Dr. Victor Hugo, welcome. And the question is, under the framework of the modernization of the Peruvian modernization system, what are the main challenges and opportunities of the recent provisional reform? Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Maria Teresa. Thank you to all participants of this event. That is so interesting. I want to congratulate Alberto and Claudia for this so useful book, and so that talks about the non-contributive pensions in the region. Thank you to the conference for the invitation. And I think that Peru starts a situation that's a little bit different in non-contributive systems, because what we had or what we have right now is a model that basically is non-contributive systems, and contributive pension is a system that is parallel between the pension system and the private pension system. And we additionally had groups of social programs aimed at non-contributive pensions or non-contributive pension that are two that are managed by the Ministry of Social Inclusion, that are called Pension 65, aimed at people that are senior citizens of 65 years old and in extreme poverty. And we have a program that is called Contigo, for you, people with severe disability. And this is addressing people with severe poverty. In the Ministry of Women in Vulnerable Situations, there's other types of programs of granting money that have to do with pensions or can be considered as non-contributory pensions for people that are teenagers, boys and girls, that have no parents and that orphans, and also victims of feminicide. So this model that we have in Peru that exists at present, and in the middle, and so yeah. So what we have, what I mentioned, is integrated in a model that we will have an umbrella, so that where we are going to see a person, and so these could connect. Um, and we have all the systems that we have. So at the end, we have this contingency, and we have this consideration. So in a contributive system, so if they have these proportional pensions or minimum pensions on the private sector, and if they are in this situation of eligibility or a situation of poverty, and so here we have the system. This is a new model that has been implemented, and where these that we saw before in a non-joint manner has coherence in a unique model, and that obviously can integrate itself before what was presented before, and Claudia and Alberta, of a situation of a model of a non-contributed pension outside, to put it in a provisional regime. So this is a main change, I believe, in the structure that obviously helps us on what we have been working, what Noelia was managing about non-contributive pensions that Noelia spoke about. But what the reform says is, in the case of the 65 pension, that is the largest model and that has talks more about non-contributive pensions, is going to change from a logic that is payments only for people in extreme poverty, is going to change and is going to go to people that are in situation of poverty. They change from extreme poverty. We extend the coverage to only poverty in order to progress. The norm and the standards say that as fast as possible, we're going to include older people, not from 75 years of age, in a group that will be favored by this change. And progressively, all people over 65 years with that are in a poverty situation will have this non-contributive pension. So the situation changes, and the industrial situation changes of the pension. And before we saw it, and I was telling you, the Minister of Social Inclusion, or in the other case, the Minister of Vulnerable Situations, and what they're saying is that we have a new article of non-contributive pensions, and the payer is the Office of Provisional Normalization. At present, this is the one I had. The office is talking and is aimed at non-contributive pensions, and we basically have a population that has been contributing, and that we have a regime, that we have quotes, and we do an estimation of contributions, and then with the new model, we are going to start interacting with the ministers that I mentioned, and then also the articulators of all the pension non-contributive systems and the contributive system. This is an important challenge, and this is something that is also relevant to mention. And there's a lot of reforms, of the reforms or the prescription in consensus. And in the case of Peru, we've had a discussion that is because the law reforms also give us, tells us what is the pension reform is all about. But the reform is going to be developed in the regulation, and we have until June of this year to start defining some matters of how this integration is going to take place. What are the elements that are going to be taken from now on to pay the pensions in this special case of non-contributive pensions? And there I feel this is a large mapping of what is happening in Peru. That is a very important change of the logic on pensions, in particular on the non-contributive pensions, and we hope that will improve the coverage, obviously with the change of pensions in favor of people that are under extreme poverty, so they will go to only just situation of poverty, and this integration will allow better communication channels and bridges. And in countries like ours, where the informality causes a lot of people not to be able to contribute because they have very small contributions and they would have to have a support or a public intervention that would be more strategic on the pension system to ensure coverage of people. Maria Teresa, this is just kind of a brush of what is happening. Here we're working with CEPAL in a few things, but this is a very important topic, and I feel that the contribution of the book opens our panorama, is very useful, and the challenge that we have is even greater. Thank you so much, Dr. Victor Hugo. Now we're going to abuse of your presence and we'll take advantage of this reform. We wanted to ask you another question because we want you to answer what is the role of this new model or that this new model grants to non-contributive pensions. You explained to us, but what is the role that this new model gives to these pensions? And please, could you expand what is the role that the OMP is going to have? Because you were telling us it's going to have to coordinate with the ministries, it's going to have to put them in order so they contribute as much as they have to contribute. So what is the role that the OMP is going to have in this new scheme in a summary and as they were explaining it to us? So yes, so thank you for the question. So it's important to think about what is connected. These didn't have any connection between the systems, in particular the pension ones, the private systems, the systems that any person can have access to, and so the non-contributive one, so a social program. So this lack of connection or disconnection caused a public intervention that would be more efficient, could not be carried out. So with this articulation, that the ONMP is a hinge that is going to see how we transfer the information from one place to the other so that it's more efficient to ensure the best benefits in coverage and sustainability in the public finances, in the provisional model, aside from betting in favor of a good sufficiency in the contributions that we can have. And let me tell you that the first stone is placed in the regulation, and it is part of an integration process of all the information systems, a system, an institutional organization that will allow all of us to be able to come to a good ending with the new pension system that has been approved in Peru not long ago. We are very faithful that this is going to have a good benefit for more people to have access to pensions, and that obviously this work that is a joint work between provisional contributive pensions, this effort that people can do while they're working, are connected to those people that have never been able to contribute in their working life. So we are going to have, in the organizational standpoint, we're going to try to have these good results, and we expect, and this is a situation that is sui generis with the reform, but here we see with great optimism the results that we can obtain. Thank you, Dr. Victor Hugo, for your presentation and for and telling us and transmitting how clear this reform is, that no question is the beginning to consolidate the non-contributive system in Peru. Thank you so much. And next, we are going to give the floor to Vanessa Weinstein, the General Director of International Affairs and Institutional Communications in the Ministry of Human Capital in Argentina, that is going to address the chapter Argentina, Current Situation and Challenges of the Non-Contributive Systems. Vanessa has experience in public policies. She's led different projects in social protection and food safety, and she's coordinated with international organisms. She has a sound academic position in sustainable development and governability. and she's going to help us answer the question, how has Argentina faced the challenges related to minimum quotes and the expansion of pension systems that are not contributed? Please, Ms. Vanessa Weinstein, go ahead. Good day, afternoon from Argentina to all the colleagues in the region. I want to thank the ECLAC for allowing me to participate in this important event to talk about the results of the book that is being presented, Non-Contributive Pension Systems in Latin America and the Caribbean, Progressing in the Solidarity with Sustainability. I want to thank the General Secretariat and Social Security, Pedro Kumamoto, the head of CEPAL, of ECLAC, and Dr. Manuel Cerón Donis from the coordinator of the Sub-Region 2, the Guatemaltecan Institute of Social Security, and my dear Claudia Robles, and all the ones that made possible this presentation. For my participation, I'm going to talk and I'm going to try to answer the question during my presentation. As you have had the opportunity of reading the book, there's chapters that talk about a topic that is very important in the center of public policy, such as the non-contributive pension systems in Latin America and the Caribbean and their implications in the solidarity and sustainability. I also consider relevant to take advantage of this technical political dialogue and learning space that are given to us by CEPAL and also through the publication done under an analytic serious framework and with an updated revision for these systems, the regional situation, their implications for the social inclusive system where social security and well-being of senior citizens are priority for our societies, and the possibility offered by these publications of presenting the best practices and lessons learned about the impact of non-contributive pension systems, taking into account the experiences of Latin American countries that have implemented these systems, non-contributive pension systems, and they can have some exchanges of ideas in favor of social inclusion and equity. It is a great privilege that we can give one another, and I would like to thank you, and I'd like to take advantage of it. The path of the book talks about the fact that the Latin American region and the Caribbean region has had an increased informality and structural inequalities, including the gender gaps. And in this context, the non-contributive systems have turned into a key tool to reduce the poverty in old age, providing revenues to those that have had non-sufficient access or nil access to traditional contributive systems. And in this sense, we can say that the expansion of pension systems, the non-contributive pension systems throughout the last few decades are one of the main innovations on public policies in the region and one of the most important ones in social security. It's also important to underscore that the pension systems, the non-contributive systems, play a very important role with other goals. They are connected with the reduction of inequalities in old age. At the same time, they play a core role in the architecture of social security protection of our countries to face social and economic challenges being faced by Latin America and the Caribbean. Throughout the last 14 years, we can observe an increase of the coverage of these systems. According to the information given to us by 23 countries, and the analysis of this situation brings us to think of the possibilities of an expansion of the non-contributive pension systems under the framework of the strengthening of provisional systems being important to eradicate poverty in old age, considering the social investment levels in these systems in a gradual manner with solidarity and sustainability.
At the same time, they promote new social pacts to strengthen the pension systems, the non-contributory pension systems, to eradicate poverty and to reduce inequality. So I agree with all the experts that wrote the book when it comes to supporting elderly people, especially when they compare contributory and non-contributory pension systems. Non-contributory pension systems are key for advancing the benefits of people in old age. The increasing social demands towards an effective pension systems demand us to work on sustainability of the protection systems. And for that, it is necessary to conduct an institutional, social, and political exercise of great scope in which the political economy plays a key role. So the welfare levels need to be defined, the ones that will be provided to people throughout all phases of life. And we need to stress or focus on the people at the latest stages in order to have an intergenerational impact. As the book says, the non contributory pension systems constitute the backbone of an agenda based on the universalization of social protection systems and moving forward towards a better state system that improves significantly the situation of people who have faced inequalities throughout their lives. In the face of all these challenges, it is key to put at the center of all the development strategies of the region a social investment that vets strategically on universal social protection systems that are integral, sustainable, and resilient. So all we are all mindful that when we have a social structure that is adequate in place, this is very important for the governments, of course. And I am also going to mention the pension system in Argentina that characterizes itself because it provides benefits and pensions to the elderly, and it has coverage for people with disabilities or people who are socially vulnerable. Although the book in the Argentinian chapter analyzes with a great level of detail the state of the non contributory pension systems in Argentina and their historical evolution up to 2023, it highlights the PUAM as a pension scheme that is for people that don't have the minimum number of years required. So, as of December 2023, up to date, there have been some changes because there was a change in the administration. So, Argentina has a pension system that has universal coverage among the elderly. And this universal pension for the elderly is still performing, and it represents a change in the coverage change. So it was created as an alternative for people who do not comply with all the requirements to retire. So AMSES provides PUAM, which is a program that is targeted at people over 65 years old that do not have the 30 years of labor activity. So they provide an amount that is equivalent to 80% of a minimum retirement plan. So this is a number that is adjusted to the mobility plan. So this is a pension mechanism that does not require any periodic renewals. So secondly, it aims to strengthen the proportionality principle since it determines that there is a big difference between the people that has made contributions for 30 years and people who haven't. And it aims to provide incentives to people so that they can make contributions to the system. The publication also analyzes three dimensions around non-contributory systems. So coverage related to the target population, how sufficient the contributions are in relation to the poverty line, and financial sustainability. I won't talk in detail of all these dimensions. I will just talk about some of them in the interest of time. So the pension system in Argentina poses significant challenges, specifically when it comes to minimum contributions and the protection of people who do not reach these thresholds. The analysis that Chapter 5 provides on the Argentinian reality focuses on how the country has faced these challenges and whether the non-contributory pension systems have been designed appropriately in order to provide effective support to the elderly. In the context of the pension system in Argentina, today we have an Argentinian pension system called SIDBA that comprises contributory and non-contributory contributions. As an example, in 2025, the minimum amount of retirement, I will say it in dollars, was set at $256.47 with an extraordinary bonus of almost $68, which increases the total to $323,986 for people who receive additional assistance. And 47% of retirees, approximately, which accounts for 2.5 million people, receive the minimum amount. The structure of the system allows us to see that there are some recipients and also contributors. We have 2.8 million contributors that fund 55% of the pension expenditure, and the rest of them comes from the national treasury. Now, when it comes to the penal matters, a high percentage of retirees, 64.1%, had access to their benefits through other types of contributions. This means that they didn't have the required number of years of contributions. So how does this work? These are basically legal tools that allow them to make retirement contributions, but not in the right time and not in the right way. So this is for people who haven't made contributions in an appropriate way, but still they can have access to a retirement plan. So this is for people in situations of vulnerability, especially women who oftentimes are forced to leave the labor market for a greater period of time. Now, when it comes to non-contributory pension schemes in Argentina, these are basically pensions targeted at people who haven't provided the necessary contributions to the pension system, like people with disabilities, elderly with no coverage, and teenage moms. So these measures aim to guarantee a minimum income to vulnerable sectors of the population, and at the same time, it strengthens the contribution social security systems. This represents a source of income to many people who are not protected by Social Security in the country, and in this way, they expand social and universal coverage. And this works as a tool to eradicate poverty in all age, promote social inclusion, and mitigate the effects of inequalities in the labor market. So very recently, new criteria were set in order to provide non-contributory pensions due to the inability to work. So we want to have an equal process for people with disabilities that need some kind of pension. So we have established new criteria for the health assessments for the inability to work. So this measure aims to guarantee a more equitable and accessible process for people who have a disability and that require economic support. Through criteria and clear guidelines to analyze the degree of disability, we are going to analyze the needs of every of every person who has requested this, so that we can provide the right pension plan. So the resolution includes a classification of the different ailments and how they affect their ability to work. So the categories go from favorable to without disability, allowing us to assess in a better and in a more honest way every case. So the national government is taking greater strides in order to tackle the waste of resources. Now we have implemented objective criteria, which eliminates this, being this arbitrarity, and this prevents people from receiving funds that were not really intended for them. And we ensure that every peso invested in the fund has an impact on the lives of people. And we have seen an increasing trend over the last few years that reflects the commitment of the Argentinian state with social protection. However, the financial sustainability of these pensions is still a challenge, specifically in high inflation contexts in which we have fiscal restrictions. So ECLAC highlights the importance of focusing on the expenditure and the purchases of the PNC. And in terms of the purchasing power, the PNC has faced challenges to keep their real value in the face of inflation. Although this is linked to the minimum salary, these adjustments not always compensate for the loss in the purchasing power. So the evolution of the PNC in Argentina has been full of efforts to improve coverage and improve the pension scheme. So we want to have reforms that ensure sustainability on the long run, including the funding sources and the implementation of policies that promote a more formal type of labor market, which will also increase the contributions to the systems and reduce the non-contributory pension scheme deficiencies. So the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Work, the Ministry of Childhood and Adolescence, they are all working on improving social protection and improving society as a whole. They are focusing on the most vulnerable populations so that they can gain autonomy. So, going back to the book, there are some debates on the need to introduce changes in the pension system in Argentina in the face of the challenges mentioned. Unfortunately, there is no time right now in order to delve into all of this, but just to finish up, I would like to highlight some recommendations for the future. As we were able to analyze throughout the reading and throughout this conversation, we've identified different strategies. I would like to highlight three of them to strengthen the non-contributory pension systems in the region. There is, for example, increasing sufficiency. It is necessary to check the amounts provided by the non-contributory pension scheme so that we make sure that they cover basic needs, and building social structures that are sustainable and promoting policies that include solidarity and sustainability. This is key to guarantee rights in old age. And universality and access, this means that we need to move towards more universal programs that ensure access to all the elderly population regardless of their labor situation. So I would like to highlight some challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. They are at least essential to me to reduce poverty in old age. As we have seen, despite all the efforts conducted and despite all the policies implemented, there are still significant gaps in terms of sufficiency and access. On the one hand, there are beneficiaries that receive insufficient funds to cover their basic needs, and this entails that we need to increase efficiency to guarantee a minimum level of income. When it comes to gender inequality, non-contributory pension systems play a key role in reducing inequalities, gender inequalities, because women tend to have less access to contributory systems because of their participation in informal jobs. So, as a conclusion, and just to wrap up, I would like to say that I agree with the vision of the experts when they say that the non-contributory pension systems in Latin America and the Caribbean are an essential response to the challenges that peoples in the region face. The PNC has allowed millions of elderly people to have access to basic needs. However, there are still significant inequalities in the region, especially when it comes to gender. Despite the progress made, it is crucial to strengthen these systems so that we can guarantee their sustainability and efficiency. This includes increasing the sufficiency of the contributions and guaranteeing universal access for all the elderly population. So what we have to do is move towards a more inclusive social protection that is also more supportive. And this is fundamental to build a more equitable reality here in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you
Muchísimas
so much.
gracias a la licenciada Vanessa Weinstein
Thank you so much, Vanessa
por
Weinstein
este
from
panorama tan
Argentina. Thank you for
concluido
this
respecto
very broad landscape that you provided on the topic, and especially on the expansion of non-contributory pension systems in your country. So right now we're going to give the floor to Pedro Alcántara, who is the head of policies when it comes to disabilities, and he's also vice president of the American Commission of Actuary and Financing of CISS. So he's going to talk about the chapter, the Dominican Republic, progress and challenges in implementing a non-contributory pension system. So Mr. Alcantara is a lawyer expert in Social Security. He has experience in financial and civil law, and he's going to talk about what is the goal of the non-contributory pension system in Dominican Republic. Please go ahead. Thank you. Hello, can you hear me? So hello everyone at CISS. I would like to welcome Pedro, and I would like to greet you as well. I have been hearing some comments about you, and people speak very highly of you. I've seen also TED conferences given by you, so it will be a great pleasure for me to meet you in person if I ever have the chance. And I would like to greet my colleagues and greet the ECLAC colleagues, and I've had the great opportunity to work with ECLAC in many fora and many experts here. Hello, everyone. In the Dominican Republic, as we have mentioned many times, the pension system had a fundamental change between 2001 and 2003. So we moved towards a universal individual capitalization system. And that system includes, for the first time in the language of the Dominican Republic, having non-contributory pension system. That is to say that we created a fund, a solidarity fund, and we created a non-contributory pension for people who don't really have access to the state pension system. So from 2003 up to 2019, so we see a span of 14 years, these solidarity pensions or non-contributory pension systems were not always working because there was a legal hindrance for their implementation. So there are some development committees that had some issues. So we had to start working on these barriers to tear them down parallelly. So we needed to work on it at the same time. So we had a very little budget for that. That would be the equivalent to 10 million Dominican pesos. And to everyone, we paid $98 to each person. So we were only able to cover 6,000 people in 2019. So as of 2020, the commitment, the presidential commitment, was covering 65,000 people, increasing by 20,000 beneficiaries every year, with increasing the budget for these pensions. So I would like to thank the participation. I would like to thank the ECLAC because your participation was key to this. Although it is true that in the Dominican Republic, the data are really desegregated, the book allowed us to classify and analyze this data so that we could optimize and streamline this process of providing non-contributory pensions so that we could cover more people. So right now we have 65,000 people covered with these kinds of pensions, although the desired or the target number is graded because we have a pension gap, a huge pension gap in the country. In the Dominican Republic, as you mentioned, in 2003, when there was a change in the law, a lot of people didn't have access to this pension. So these people were left unprotected. So other programs needed to protect them. So the gap is really big, but to bridge that gap is very difficult because, as other panelists mentioned, there is a great level of informality or informal jobs, and this affects us greatly in the Dominican Republic. There is fiscal informality and social security informality. Both are present in my country. So the fiscal informality is important in this case because we need to have a budget to pay for these pensions. And if we don't comply with a specific budget, we won't be able to cover new members. And now, when it comes to raising the contributions, since there is no formality, since there are great levels of informality when it comes to Social Security, we don't have a great number of people who are eligible for this. So we have an increasing number of informality in both regards. Another problem that we have as a country is the quoting density. This density is not enough to make sure that the people who are working and who have already pension systems can benefit from the benefit of the, well, can receive the benefit of the pension. So, for example, there are other solidarity pension schemes that the tax regime in the country needs to pay for. So there are also impact analyses that we have been doing. We've also tried to strengthen the systems, and this allowed us to identify the specific challenges we have. We have coverage challenges. As I told you, we are receiving non-contributory pension systems, and this number is greater than the paying capacity or payment capacity that we have. So in the Dominican Republic, we have an inclusive pension for single mothers or single parents. It doesn't matter what age they are. So our population range or our population scope is not only people that are 65 years old and over. We also focus on moms or dads who are single parents. And it doesn't matter how old they are also eligible for these kinds of pensions. And as I told you, this can increase the coverage scope. Now, when it comes to financial sustainability, there are many challenges. So, for example, achieving sustainability is influenced by the pillars that we mentioned before. So, fiscal informality, social protection informality, and the density. And there is also a high level of unemployment that also affects these kinds of contributions that can be made to the system. So, this creates like a stacking up of challenges. Every person receives like $98, which is only a portion of the salary, of the national salary. So this is only for the households to get out of poverty. So we measure the quality of life in the households based on 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the households eligible for this are the ones that rank in number 1. So they may the ones that earn less than $100 monthly. So every person that receives a solidarity pension will get out of poverty because they will reach the next level. So there are still many challenges ahead, but this is great progress. I would like to thank everyone, and I would like to thank ECLAC for the studies that they have conducted in the Dominican Republic. We are undergoing a transformation process. We are transforming the Social Security law. And all these classifications and analyses are very important because in the past, the data that we had was really disaggregated, but having formal data is key in order to implement pensions and to reform the law at hand. So thank you so much for your invitation, and if you have any questions, I'm here for you. Thank you so much, Mr. Pedro, for sharing this experience that has taken place in the Dominican Republic, and thank you for your willingness to participate in these spaces. Now, I will give the floor to Mr. Victor Martinez, who is the manager of the Honduran Social Security Institute. He's going to talk about the chapter on Honduras, the challenges for building a non-contributory pension system. Mr. Victor is a lawyer. He is a public notary and he focuses on social matters. He also manages social security systems and he has received many specialized courses on social protection provided by our Institute of Studies. So the question for Mr. Victor would be, what are the potential scenarios to expand the social protection in Honduras through a pension system that is non-contributory? Please go ahead. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I greet you from the heart of the Americas, and it is a great pleasure for me to address you and tell you about the situation that Honduras is experiencing when it comes to social protection. I think it's necessary to acknowledge that our country is lagging behind when it comes to social protection. Over time, many efforts have been made, efforts to mitigate the effects of poverty, regardless of the age. So the approach that we are developing right now is an approach more linked to the elderly and to old age. In Honduras, many efforts have been made over time. However, these efforts have been isolated, if you will, because they haven't really achieved sustainable and sustained impact on our society. As we were mentioning before, we're lagging behind. We've made many efforts, but it is important to highlight the importance of these kinds of systems. But it is also important to analyze the situation that our contributory system has, because our contributory system was set up for that, to mitigate the effects of poverty in old age. However, we can see that our system is a bit behind in many ways. So the Social Security Institute of Honduras is in charge of the public pension system. However, we see that there is great inequality and there is a great difference and diversity. There are some special regimes, for example, the regimes for public employees like teachers, like army officers, and even teachers of the University of Honduras. So our system may not be necessarily similar to Central American and other Latin American systems, because our system right now is like an allocation system. It is a collective capitalization system. However, it has a peculiarity which we are going to try to explain later on, or maybe you as specialists will be able to infer what are the consequences of the system. And it is the fact that the contribution or quoting rate is quite low. In the case of our country, the employee pays to the disability plan or retirement plan 2.5% of their payroll, and the employer pays 3.5%. So what is the problem here? This is not necessarily related to the contribution rate. The problem of this. The problem is that there is a cap for the contributions of the employees, and the cap is nearly 11 million. It doesn't reach $100. So obviously, this is going to have a destroying effect, because the replacement rate that we're providing in terms of the average of what one person is making would reach 27, 32%. But it is not actually complying with the goals of the pension system. Therefore, based on that and drawing on that scenario, we have realized that the pensioners are people who don't receive an adequate and appropriate pension for their retirement. And it is not only because they do not comply with the requirements for the pension plan, it is also because we have seen, many efforts being made so that we can consider within the pension healthcare, healthcare of the pensioners. Although it is true that the system is a bit weak when it comes to healthcare, this may be due, or well, this means that the pensioner needs to use some of the resources of the pension to pay for healthcare and to cover for the deficiencies in the pension. So, although they are receiving a type of pension, it is not sufficient for them to lead a dignified life. And for example, with other pension systems, what we have seen is that when they don't have a contribution cap and when they have a cap of 30%, there is great disparity. So we, as part of the institute, we handle more than 80% of everyone who is making the contributions to the pension system. And we also manage the greatest percentage of economic benefits. So we can see that the effects of this are quite great. So obviously, it is important to make efforts in order to establish these kinds of non-contributory pensions. And we have seen that it is necessary to expand, or well, not expand, but actually implement a social protection floor in Honduras, just like the one that the framework law on social protection wanted to achieve, because that law aimed at addressing this system through different scenarios. Obviously, a series of challenges were identified because, as I told you earlier, we were lagging behind when it came to pension systems. So, part of these efforts, part of the framework act's objective is to make people have access to pensions through non-contributory pension systems in order to eradicate poverty and in order to strengthen social cohesion. So this framework law on social protection was published in the Journal of the Federation in 2015.
And we were trying to establish a system where we would establish in our pillars the part related to the non-contributive systems through a social protection floor. And of course, the other pillar is establishing provisional systems. Even more so, it expanded up to the part of uh, the private pension. So we would do a whole social protection system for the worker and his or her family. This social protection floor was constituting a progressive platform for social solidarity development that would be inclusive. And even more so, it would take as a starting point building the universality and having the rights of Social Security of the population. And we see that in general, it is not focused only mitigating poverty at an old age, but also in all the different extracts of people's lives, including the children, including students, including people with disability, for example, widows. But at the end of the day, we saw that this was an effort that was huge. However, we were not able to concrete the goals of this law. So we saw that basically this law was foreseeing two important components. One was a basic a group of social rights and transfers in kind or monetary transfers to establish a platform that progressively could be developed on the social aspect and the solidarity aspect, and also in the inclusive aspect, in order to ensure access to these contributions. That we said that there's people that did not have an economic contribution because of any contributory type of system. So also ensuring an essential levels of social levels, plans such as water, plans such as health and education, sewage, food, housing, even the recreational aspects, also looking to generate jobs and for the financial aspects and other agreements of needs that could be established as a national priority. So within these populational segments that was being covered by this framework law and focused on what we're seeing, we have the assistance programs for senior citizens that was trying to grant, on the one hand, a pension, a non-contributive pension to help them really improve their the extreme poverty situation. But the framework law of social protection, unfortunately, was declared unconstitutional, was declared unconstitutional because of the Supreme Court of Justice. And if you ask me, we haven't discussed this topic, so I asked myself, why did they declare it unconstitutional? It didn't make sense, but within it established that the framework law did not comply with constitutional criteria, and it said that the administration, the Social Security, was in charge of the state and it was public, and the law established the criteria of subrogation or also services that this is a privatization and this is not outside the administration of Social Security. However, it's important to acknowledge that, again, we have Social Security. And so, first, unfortunately, we as an institution have lived that. So, we have been victims of a series of resolutions in its majority because they're outside the doctrine and they're outside Social Security that jeopardize us. So, I consider that part of these had a devastating effort because we were working in the establishment of this floor. And it is true that this was a proposal that was very advanced in what we have lived. However, now this is the principle in order to establish this necessary basis to develop a system, a pension system, a non-contributive pension system. And it was highly developed. The proposal was very well developed, and many times, and according to what I was reading, in all the bibliography, we see that in some of the most difficult part is the budgetary part. A peer of mine spoke about it regarding the budgetary aspects, and in that sense, they were defining even how the financing was working for the non-contributive part, and part of it they established within the ordering of public financing. They established, for example, that all legal people that within their income taxes as a solidary part for the financing of this program established that they were going to contribute 5% of the excess of the of over 1 million. So they also established that the state per se was going to contribute 20% of all the new cannons that the state would give them. And as an institution, so for private parties, they also established that within the solidarity aspects, and that they were going to contribute 15% of the profitability generated through the different provision systems. So we are within a contributory system. So they establish on over 4 or 5% of investments, because this 4.5% rate was the technical rate that our supervisory entity has set. But there were other budgetary incorporations in order to really support the financing of this social protection floor. But unfortunately, I believe that we have to go back and we have to give greater priority to this topic and give it more emphasis and political visibility. And likewise, when we had the visit of people from the ECLAC together with CEDESO, that is a ministry of the social part of Honduras, we saw which are the scenarios, how could we use and how could we generate opportunities to be able to develop this system of a non-contributory system. So we spoke also about a first scenario that is precisely granting a pension and a non-differentiated pension for all people over 65 years of age. And we spoke about the only exclusion that we could have are those people that have a contributory pension. So from their socioeconomic level, there's people that are able to enjoy this benefit. So let's say that within this proposal that we see advantages on the administration that is simple, and what the way we're going to interact is having an interinstitutional relationship in order to share information on those people that already have a contributory pension, so that we have to exclude that group and we can benefit the ones that don't have a contributory pension. Another advantage we saw that it was total coverage for people that are over 65 years of age, aside from the proposals. And that is what the ECLAC does, starting with the stage, starting with people that are older, and from there expanding the coverage. First, people that are 65 years and over. And we're looking with that, obviously, to eradicate poverty, but at least mitigate poverty, sometimes the negative aspects of poverty. And what are the challenges that we saw at that point that have an elevated the cost? So we saw, for example, the part of the proposal of how are we financing this? And this was a very important effort for the tax authorities. As the economists say, we saw the possibilities in the production, and there we were going to see that the budget, or that the state budget, because it was going to be financed with the state budget, that we had to give priorities over other topics to be able to develop this social protection system. But unfortunately, the financial capability of our country is quite limited. And the GDP is around $3,590, and per capita, and our GDP is in $118 billion. We have a budget that is quite, how can I say, strict, in order to make more efficient resources. And another of the possibilities that we are facing are making a focalized system for all those people that have greater needs and people that have a extreme poverty. It's in particular for those people that meet some vulnerability criteria. And some of the advantages that we saw that was that if you are going to give priority to some people, you're going to have a priority for certain funds, and the focus was going to give a priority for those people that need it the most. within the challenges, we see the subjectiveness in the selection criteria and exclusion criteria in order to identify beneficiaries and an administrative cost per generation, because we would have to do it at a national level and also with a special focus on the rural area. So these making these efforts, focalization efforts, are very expensive. And because of our own experience, we at a particular level we manage a project, an social project with people with severe poverty, and looking at the kids that have greater needs and doing this type of surveys. It takes a long time, and they're very costly. So these surveys was one way of finding who are these children, who are these people that need greater support. Another perspective we saw is strengthening also the existing programs and looking to focus more focusing more on senior citizens, because we as an institution and other social provision institutes have the platforms to manage already the the management of the for the payment of the payment of these benefits. So we have to establish a criteria. And as I said before, we had managed before, or we were managing, and the study talked about a minimum pension of 1,500 empiras. And I spoke to the officials that this is a minimum pension that we are paying Social Security, that are 1,500 empiras, 1,500 empiras. And with that, I consider it's necessary also to try to strengthen the contributory system, because it would be demotivating for a worker to work for 15, 20 years, and suddenly his pension is going to be very similar to those people that did not work. And also, and for to develop these systems, so we have also to strengthen the contributory system. We have to improve that in the way that our system and the coverage is greater, because for you to know, the contributory system amongst the Social Security and the other regimes that have been on Social Security, and we don't reach this 22% of the economically active population. And that means that the rest is the state, the one that has to get hold of that. So as we strengthen further our pension system, contributive system, we will, to some extent, is going to help support and for the state to be able to establish those policies, to establish a non-contributive system. So we have to establish clear, robust policies to eradicate poverty in old age, because we see that in Honduras, the older population, most of them do not have access to a pension system whatsoever, not contributed, not non-contributive, not even, they don't even reach 75, 78%. And we also see the need, because we also see the poverty that is being lived by our country. And so we have to establish these policies, and because we have a high impact, a high social impact, and because they reduce or mitigate poverty by when so they ensure old people minimum wages or minimum income so they can survive. So we consider very important, and we consider that our authorities, the ones in charge of making decisions, should also be aware and should have social consciousness to develop these and other systems. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Victor Martinez, the lawyer of the Honduran Social Security Institute, and thank you also to this institution that is part of our membership and always support us with their active participation. And in closing this round of questions and comments, I'm going to give the floor to Floria Jurgen's friend. He is Global Social Protection Advisor of sorry, I'm not pronouncing it for its acronym in English. I really apologize if I'm not pronouncing it properly. So we've had the opportunity of working before, and it's such an honor to have him making these final reflections in this panel, and obviously grant us a global perspective. Thank you, Florian. We'd like to give you the floor.
Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here. And I will not try to summarize or reflect on the rich discussion that we've had, but I want to share some of my own thoughts. So just to quickly say, I work for WIGO, which stands for Women in Informal Employment, Globalizing and Organizing. It's a long name. We're a research and advocacy organization focused on informal workers. Before joining WIGO as Global Social Protection Advisor, I actually had the same role at another similar organization, HelpAge International, which is very focused on social pensions. So over the last, let's say, two kind of recent jobs that I've had, social pensions have been very much at the heart of my thinking about social protection as my work, and something I feel very passionately about. So I'm very happy to talk to you about this. And as you will have just noticed, I often refer to them, I never know what's the right word, but I tend to call them social pensions. And tax finance is something I also like. Non-contributory, I feel like sometimes implies that people are not contributing, which they may not do in a social security sense, but maybe in a broader sense. So that's a word that I often use. It's a personal preference, but I think using the word social also nicely captures the quite wide-ranging benefits of these pensions, right? So, of course, the economic and material benefits, right? They reduce poverty amongst older people. If they're large and substantive enough about in populations in general, they can have economic multiplier benefits. They can use various inequalities between men and women, urban and rural population, indigenous populations. They have large substantive economic impacts, and I think we know that. But at the same time, they're also very strong non-material psychosocial impacts, and these are, in my research, particularly with HelpAge previously in my work, I feel like almost come out the strongest. Impacts on health and health spending, on reducing depression. We've had these really interesting studies of older people being more hopeful about the future, feeling more respected, have greater agency, higher levels of well-being, and I think that's and self-worth and recognition. And I think these non-economic, non-material benefits are as important as the material, the economic ones. I think it's also really interesting as part of talking about the social that there is sometimes this idea that they're crowding out informal family support, but I think what we know is that I think it's actually quite the opposite, that if anything, they enable people to take a more active community life, and if anything, giving older people the resources and not being dependent for every little thing of their families, it allows them to contribute more to society. I think one of the best studies on this in South Africa was called Grandmothers and Granddaughters, which you might be familiar with, and it's about inter-household, intergenerational sharing that is enabled by social pension, which I think is quite beautiful. But of course, for all of that to work, they have to be adequate, right? The sufficiency, the adequacy is centrally important to any of this. And from what I've gathered, there's still challenges on that. I've read in the report there's only a number of countries that have entitlements up to the poverty line. And I think while obviously I see the challenges of increasing those amounts, I do think it's important to say that if they're not sufficient to meet to lift people out of poverty, to enable them to meet their basic needs, older people will be forced to continue to work, which can get increasingly difficult with health challenges, or forced to rely on family support, which in some cases works. In other cases, it can create, lots of tensions in households, put pressures on younger generations, maybe make it more difficult for them to invest in their children and their futures. So I think there's costs as well to not, ensuring the adequacy. So the cost of inaction there, I think, is a strong one. And I appreciate that this is highlighted in the book. I think I think social pensions have made such progress over the last, 20, 30, 10, 5 years in achieving coverage, that I think coverage is less the question now than adequacy. I think that's maybe where the more important battles are now fought, in terms of making sure that these are substantive benefits. Obviously, I work for an organization that is, focused on women workers, particularly in the informal economy. So I do want to highlight how important social pensions are for gender equality. And I really appreciate that that's very in detail discussed in the book. I think it's a very important aspect of this. And, we know that in most places, women tend to outlive men, live healthier lives. There's a number of reasons for that, I'm sure. We also know that women continue to lead the lion's share of unpaid care work in the household, face discriminations in the labor market. All of that, as all of this, it leads to lower earnings, more interrupted working careers. I think what's interesting in terms of informality, that men are actually globally slightly more likely to work informally, but in low middle income countries, women are the majority or more likely to work informally. And I think even more importantly, where women work informally, they tend to work in more precarious and more low-paid sectors of the informal economy. So there's substantive and structural discrimination and disadvantage that women face in the labor force, and all of that conspires to result in lower pension entitlements for women. And I think it's interesting to think about that these labor market inequities can either be amplified by the pension system or they can be ameliorated, right? So either pension system translate them into older age, or they do what they can to reduce those. And obviously the pressure is not just on pension systems, but also on labor markets more general. There's many things we need to do about this from a care perspective, all kinds of things. So it's not just on the pension system, but the pension system does have a role to play as well. And I think that speaks both to contributory, so the social insurance side. There's things that we can do, care credits, top-ups. Lots of countries, particularly in Europe, but also in Latin America, I think, are starting to integrate these gender consideration in the social security side, and that is really important. But equally important, and maybe as important for low-income earners, is a substantive social pension. I think is one of the people don't often see it as kind of gender responsive social protection. I think sometimes it doesn't have that label, but I think it's one of the most substantive contributions that society can make to gender equality in older life. So I appreciate that that's part of the book. I also really appreciate that the book locates social pensions within a pension system. So when I work on pensions, I used to get very frustrated that pensions can be framed as essentially developmental cash transfers, right? And that locates them in a very different debate, very different policy dynamic. We get issued poverty targeting, maybe even conditionalities. It puts them in a very different space, rather than seeing them as integral pieces to a pension system. They're just part of but I think they have to be strongly placed in that, because otherwise they're seen as just kind of cash transfers, which I think is a very different logic. So I really respect that phrase, location. And I think thinking about the two most, there's obviously a number of objectives to a pension system, right? But the two important ones are poverty reduction and consumption smoothing, right? So ensuring that people have a basic level of income in older age, poverty reduction, protection against poverty, and then the other one, consumption smoothing, creating a relationship between the earnings that you have through your working career and in older age, right? So, so these are both equally important, and I think we know that they're best achieved by a mix of contributory and non-contributory pensions, right? If we feel it's both important to ensure that everybody has a basic level of protection, but we also think it's important but we also want people to give the opportunity to have higher levels of protection as can be provided by a social pension. We need both contributory and non-contributory, right? I think that's a given. And I think part of that understanding is also understanding the advantages and limitations of both types of pensions, right? The non-contributory and the contributory. And while social pensions can become more adequate, they should become more generous, for lack of a better word. I think for many people, they will provide a floor, right? But they will not, certainly not for middle-class people, I think, replace pre-retirement incomes, right? For that, we need Social Security. At the same time, contributory Social Security pensions will always be linked to earnings in the labor market, right? So they will always bring in those inequities from the labor market into older age. So that means we always need both, I think. We always need a dual extension strategy to extend coverage, particularly for low-income workers. We need adequate, universal, or broad-based social pension to ensure that everybody has at least basic income security, but we also need more inclusive social insurance. So we cannot expect social pension to do all the lifting if people only have a social pension, or if public systems don't provide the higher level of protection that people aspire to. People might look for kind of private solutions, and I think those are dissatisfactory for most, I think. So we need, and this is, working for an organization focused on informality. In addition to having adequate social pensions, we also need to make sure that social insurance, contributory social protection, becomes more inclusive towards low-income workers, informal workers, that those schemes recognize the diversity of work, care work, informal work, and expand beyond the oftentimes relatively small formal labor force. And since we need both contributory and non-contributory, the way that they are related to another, the way that they're integrated or not integrated, becomes, I think, a really big question. And I really like about this book that that there is attention to be paid to placing social pensions in a pension system and thinking about the integration, institutional, political, financial implementation of pension systems as a whole, and not treating social pension as a standalone cash transfer. So I think that focus on consolidated, institutions and policy coherence, I think, is important. And just to conclude, I think aside from pushing for greater adequacy and maybe coverage where needed, I believe that this integration and coherence issue between the non-contributory and the contributory going forward is going to be, I think, maybe the biggest challenge, but also opportunity. In the end, these are just different ways of financing pensions, right? So maybe we shouldn't even think of them as different pension, but rather different financing mechanisms. And for certain people at certain stages in their lives, maybe they had a kid, they get some tax finance coming in, then they rely more on contributory systems. Integrating these will allow us to do the things that we want to do around balancing, adequacy with sustainability, with contributions, but also with concerns around gender equality and equity more general. So those are my final reflections. It's a brilliant book, and I'm honored to be here and have shared my thoughts. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, Florian, por tu
Thank you so
intervención.
much, Florian, for your intervention and for your comments, so polite and so correct according to the participation. So in this event, but also thank you to the book per se. I think that we only in finishing, we have our controller, Nicolas Estarca, that is Chilean, and he's always highly depending on all the activities that we have over here. And he will he'll ask a question that to start goes for Dr. Arenas. and for Claudia, and after that, a country that would like to answer. However, the controller is going to tell us, and so this is going to be the countries that have these systems. And so if we have these requirements to have these type of contributions, so that would be the question. Or maybe a country would like to answer, maybe in the same question to CEPAL would be, even your countries, we have these type of requirements, so if you consider also if they should exist. So go ahead, Dr. Arenas or Claudia, whoever would like to support us with the question first.
Alberto, por favor.
Perfecto, perfecto. No, bueno, muchas gracias por la consulta.
Thank you so much for the inquiry. And the design in general on the pensions for the contribution and non-contributive and non-contributive is a region in the world. And this is something that is different. But when you think about the contributions, maybe we have some requirements so we can have access, for example, because of the age, and because sometimes we have some requirements to have access to some of these things, and etc. And so this is the logic, and this can be applied. And then the countries that they have these opportunities have, for example, an age requirement. And for example, this is not at any age, so they could have a contribution, a non-contributive contribution, and there we are going to have a different requirement. So depending on how the design is, so because of the, so if we have a system, so we can have the system, and this could be, and we could think of some requirements, in particular connected to, for example, reaching the most vulnerable populations so that they would effectively live under the poverty line, or, for example, more with the extreme poverty line. So, in general, in that sense, I give these two examples because I know there could be many others, but in general, we have a non contributive system that has adequate requirements, but in general, is going to depend on how this design works. So sometimes we have to see an implementation at the beginning. We would have a coverage and the right licensing. So we have to say that there should be a combination between sufficiency and coverage. So yes, there is nothing against these requirements, but as a matter of fact, most of them have the requirement of access because of age, and also other requirements, such as I mentioned before, aside from income, to assign priority in the first stage, the implementation, and we have a minor coverage of the first income. And there, according to us, we have to assign priorities to the attention of pension systems that are not contributive. I don't know if Claudia would like to add something. With regard to this answer, no, because I think that you've given a very good outlook on this topic on my behalf. I only wanted to thank all the comments and all the interventions that are very valuable. We're taking them with us. I feel that this is so rich, the fact of knowing the situations of the different countries, the opportunities and challenges that each of the countries are living, that have intervened in order to continue expanding and strengthening their pension systems, but also, as mentioned by Flori, the need of joining the contributory system and strengthening the pension system as a whole. On my behalf, I only wanted to take this space to thank each and every one of you for these valuable comments, to thank again the conference, Brandon, Saida, and the Secretary General, and of course, to thank on behalf of the ECLAC for their support, and Wambila that was also giving us such an important support for this participation of this day. Thank you so very much. Thank you to both of you. And this question was open to the other commentators that are with us today. And the controller is asking if you consider that there should be specific requirements, or what are the experiences that countries have had establishing specific requirements for non-contributive pensions, in particular for a vision that people that need so are the ones that have access and not others that don't need so. I don't know if any of the countries would like to answer.
Bueno, pues ahí, si no la dejamos y después.
If not, we leave it and we'll send it for you to answer them. Thank you so much again. And the last comment, Brandon, that you made from Canada. Very briefly, I wanted to say thank all the membership that has been connected and has been commenting and has been in different platforms, from Dr. Monsalvo in Colombia, that is over there commenting, and exactly our Canadian support, our great ally, Natalie Martel, put a message in chat. I wanted to share it with you. And she said, Canada has a non-contributive pension system since 1952. And this event has opened the vision that other countries in the region are doing so. And she mentions an observation that she leaves on the table for all the panelists on the topic of financial sustainability. And she says that from the Canadian outlook, we could make a reference of this topic when we talk about contributive systems, because when you talk about non-contributive systems, the position of the team is that the government will always have this financial sustainability if they're ready to increase their debt and they want to increase taxes or reduce expenses.
So he brings to the table the relevance, or, the precision of using a sustainability type of financial activity here in the pension system. So I don't know if you would like to delve into this a bit more. So thank you to everyone, to all the members in Canada. Well, thank you so much, and thank you to all the member institutions, and thank you to all the panelists. A special thanks to all of you. Thank you for this work that has been provided by ECLAC, that has opened up a conversation at CISS about non-contributory pension systems. This is a very valuable contribution, and we hope this space was really enriching for you too, and I hope it keeps fostering dialogue to have more inclusive and sustainable social protection systems. And I apologize on behalf of Mr. Pedro Kumamoto, who had to leave early. But anyway, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your participation.
Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias.
Buena tarde. Gracias.